Hey everybody, it's Mr. Hasquin, and I'm back with more things that you should know by being alive. Today I want to break down the New Deal, one of the most transformative eras in American history. So please understand I'm not going to be able to hit everything, but I'm going to do my best to give an overview. Think of this as like a survey course in a short amount of time, right? Um, as far as the New Deal goes, it was more than just programs and alphabet agencies. It reshaped how Americans saw government and hope and each other during the darkest days of the Great Depression. So, why why did America need a New Deal? Well, in the 1930s, the United States was basically in economic freefall. The Great Depression, which had started with the 1929 stock market crash, led to banks collapsing and businesses shutting down and 1 in 4 Americans losing their jobs. And it wasn't just numbers. It meant families losing homes, farmers losing land, to dust storms, the Dust Bowl, and debt. And then also long lines for bread that replaced the optimism of the Roaring Twenties. And by 1932, the United States was a nation that was desperate for change. And FDR steps in. So enter Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He's elected president in 1932 with a promise of a new deal for the American people. FDR brought a sense of calm and confidence. He used his fireside chats on the radio to speak directly to Americans, and he wanted to assure them that the government would take action. He believed that government should help people when people were suffering, which was a sharp contrast to President Hoover's limited government response, keeping his government out of people's lives as much as possible. And so the first 100 days of FDR's presidency were super important. And in those first 100 days, in 1933, FDR and Congress just launched this explosion of programs in an attempt to stabilize the economy. Banks were closed temporarily with these banking holidays. That way they were inspected under the Emergency Banking Relief Act, and that was an attempt to restore trust in the banking system. The FDIC was created, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It was created to insure deposits, to protect people's savings. Alphabet agencies began popping up everywhere, tackling different problems. And each one had its own mission to get people back to work or support farmers and rebuild the economy. So effectively, the plan just becomes, let's put America back to work. And so, for example, the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, it put young men, back to work, and they were doing things like planting trees, building parks, trying to prevent soil erosion, which had led to the devastation of the Dust Bowl. It wasn't just about the jobs. It was a chance to restore dignity to families and improve the environment on top of that, right? And then you had the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, and it was even bigger. And it employed millions of people to build roads and schools and bridges, public buildings. You had artists and writers and musicians, and they were hired to, document American stories, create murals. They wanted to show the value of culture even during all this hardship. Another one was the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. They built dams across the South in order to bring electricity to rural communities while controlling floods, creating jobs. So this all is part of a process, to support farmers, to support homeowners, farmers who had been devastated by falling prices and the Dust Bowl found relief in programs like the AAA, or it was the Agricultural Adjustment Act, and that paid them to reduce production, which led to the stabilization of prices. Then you had the Homeowners Loan Corporation and the Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, and they were to help families keep their homes and have affordable mortgages. For many, the New Deal was the first time the government helped them survive economic hardship. Now, there comes about a second New Deal as well. And this is, when the economy didn't fully recover, FDR launches the second New Deal in around 1935, right? And so we have the Social Security Act of 1935, which created a safety net for elderly Americans, the unemployed, and the disabled. And this was to ensure a basic level of support in hard times. Then you have the Wagner Act, the NLRA, which strengthened labor rights. This allowed workers to unionize and collectively bargain without fear of employer reprisals or retaliation, and it laid the groundwork for the modern labor movement. We have the Rural Electrification Administration, the REA, and this was like the TVA to bring electricity to rural areas, and it would transform everyday life on farms and in small towns around the country. Now, we do have to recognize the fact that the New Deal wasn't perfect. There were criticisms, there were challenges. It faced these criticisms from all sides. The conservatives, well, they argued that it expanded governmental power too much. And while some on the left believed it didn't go far enough to help the poor and the working class. And the Supreme Court stepped up and it struck down some New Deal programs, declaring them unconstitutional. And it led FDR to propose his controversial court packing plan, which was he wanted to add more justices to the court so he could have more support. Plan failed, but the court did grow more favorable to New Deal measures as more time passed. While we can't talk about the New Deal without also bringing into the discussion how race worked its way into the New Deal as well. And while the New Deal helped millions, racial discrimination still persisted in the United States. Many New Deal programs excluded domestic and agricultural workers, affecting many Black Americans and Latino workers. But still, programs like the WPA and the CCC provided some opportunities. And the New Deal laid groundwork for future civil rights pushes by providing federal government involvement, and that it showed that it could improve lives. Now, the big question we should face here is: did the New Deal end the Great Depression? It eased suffering, it stabilized the economy, but it didn't fully end the Great Depression. What finally brought the United States out of economic depression was World War II. And the war mobilization created jobs and the industrial demand that eliminated mass unemployment. Not to mention the fact that you'd have men drafted into the armed forces as well. So, what is the legacy of the New Deal? Despite its limits, the New Deal did leave a lasting mark. Social Security and unemployment insurance remain key safety nets. The FDIC and the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, they continue to protect banking and our financial systems. Roads, schools, dams, and public works that were all built under New Deal programs still serve our communities. It redefined the government's role in supporting citizens during hardship. So, why? Why does it matter, right? Why am I talking about it? Well, because I feel the New Deal teaches us government can take bold action during crises. I think it teaches us economic security for people strengthens our society. I think that the debates about government's role in economic life, which began during the New Deal, continue on today. The New Deal was more than just programs. It was a promise to the American people that even in the hardest times we can work together to rebuild, reform, and also to renew hope. I know I couldn't cover it all, but like I said, this is just like a thin layer over the depth of the history here. So please, if you learned something or you like something, like, comment, follow, share for more things you should know by being alive, because understanding the New Deal helps us understand how America responds when the times get tough. Thanks for watching.